Hey, welcome to the Pharmacy Residency Podcast, a member of the Pharmacy Podcast Network. Some people ask me, should they just go to medical school instead of doing residency? After PGY1, PGY2, they would have been halfway through medical school. And most are saying, well, I couldn't afford it or something like that. But 7 medical schools could be free. So it kind of depends on which medical school and what you're thinking about. So let me tell you a little bit about the free medical schools and how it works. But it was just kind of an interesting question. Should I go to medical school or pharmacy school since medical school could be free? And then the follow-up question, which is, should I do a residency or would it make more sense to go to medical school for free? So the 7 medical schools that offer free tuition include NYU, Columbia, Cornell, so 3 New York schools, Washington University in St. Louis, UCLA, Cleveland Clinic, and Kaiser Permanente. And each of them has kind of their own thing with it. So I want to talk a little bit about that. But if you are thinking about medical school after, the thing is that the financial aid, or when they're looking at your income, they're looking at your past years, which are your pharmacy school years. And, if you're working as an intern, I remember my wife making, $7,000 or something like that. So I can't imagine that it would be too much. So you start with NYU and, the tuition's $58,000 a year. Every student that goes to NYU gets the $58,000 off, so they save $232,000 a year, and then they end up paying about $30,000 for living expenses each year. So, average NYU student, you're spending another $30,000 a year. But if your part-time job is as a pharmacist, and you work a couple hours or whatever every week, I can't imagine that you couldn't get pretty close to that number. Columbia is a little bit different. Your family has to be under a household income of, I think it was around $125,000 or less. If that's the case, then they also would provide it. And I think it only works out to about a fifth of the students. But still, Columbia is an Ivy League school, Ivy League medical school that you could possibly go to for free. Cornell also has it. And what they did was they just said, okay, well, look, if you're going to get instead of, kind of messing with it, we're just going to say if you're offered student loans, instead of giving you student loans, we'll just give you scholarships. Okay. So whatever your, perceived amount that you're supposed to pay is, and then you need to get loans, it just says, okay, well, we'll take care of those loans for you. And I think the MD, PhD students can get full tuition with living expenses. And I think the school and the National Institutes of Health kind of go together. Washington University in St. Louis, about half of its student body gets a tuition discount to zero. And I know that has a lot to do with, I feel like, financial need on that one. But it also does give some partial tuition scholarships. And that's becoming a little more common in pharmacy school. But honestly, it's not going to ever hit until pre-pharmacy students start applying to multiple schools. The average pharmacy student applied to only between 2 and 3 schools, even though there's a 90%, well, it's going to be 90% this year probably, but a 90% acceptance rate. You want to do the exact opposite. And I get it's counterintuitive, but how can you know what the best situation is with residency match rate, NAPLEX scores, how you feel about the school, where they are, if you're only applying to 2 or 3 schools? And so people are applying out of convenience instead of kind of looking down the long term. But, I'm not going to fault somebody who's 19, 20 for doing that. I don't know if I would have had the wherewithal to do that. But Washington University in St. Louis, that's another medical school you could look at. UCLA, 1 out of 4 students at UCLA doesn't have to worry about tuition. You can, at UCLA, actually get in based on merit. Which is a big deal. And then you can also get a monthly stipend, and this is crazy, of up to $2,700. So just round it to 3,000. You're talking about $30,000 a year to go to medical school at UCLA, and you don't pay tuition. It's just crazy. Cleveland Clinic, I think they waive tuition for its 32 students each year. It used to be a different medical school, but it's done that, since it's going to be over a decade now that they've been doing that. And then Kaiser Permanente is uh, is only doing it, I think, for the first 5 classes of students. So those going out to 2024. Once you get out of that, it's going to be $95,000 without the tuition waiver. But you're going to have $35,000 to live in Pasadena. Even that's not going to go very far. It's kind of one of the most expensive places in the country to live. So although it's not exactly free, those 7 schools are definitely places that you would want to look to. So you're saying, well, I didn't get a residency. Well, maybe you didn't get a residency, but maybe try medical school. New NYU, Columbia, Cornell, Washington and St. Louis, UCLA, Cleveland Clinic, and Kaiser all have some degree of providing that kind of aid to future medical students. And I did have a past episode 414, PharmD to MD, a success story. But, as you're kind of looking forward and you're saying, well, maybe some of the things I want to do aren't covered in residency. Maybe I want to be a surgeon. Or I remember one of the students at my school that was in the year behind me actually went right from Maryland to Dartmouth. And he'd been a physician ever since. And I think he was a surgeon. So, just kind of a neat thing to think about as you're kind of freaking out about residency. Just think, well, maybe I'll just go to, medical school instead. And I think that that's certainly a viable thing. I talk to a lot of pre-students here at DMAC, whether it be nursing or pharmacy or medicine or whatever. And I'm just kind of amazed at that, they don't realize that, you could go to medical school for free in this country. And it's just kind of a really cool thing. So, all right. Well, I know that was kind of a little bit break from what I usually talk about, but I know some of you are looking at this residency year and saying, I just don't know if this is going to be for me. And 1,400 of you have not gotten interviews to do residency. But what the skills that you need to be successful in the residency match process can be very different from what you need in the medical school process, because the MCAT weighs so heavily. So if you are a good test taker and you do have a high GPA, but it was some of the communication things, the letters and the those types of things that kind of sunk you, maybe you do think about medical school as the next step. Or if you're thinking about pharmacy and kind of deciding between pharmacy and medicine, what you might want to do is say, all right, well, I'll give that a shot. It sounds like there's a couple of schools that I could go to school tuition free, and I might do that. Another thing some students do is they think about online programs rather than in-person programs. And pharmacy schools have now ballooned up to, I think, 7 online programs. I'm trying to remember. Yeah, so Butler, Creighton in alphabetical order, Duquesne, LECOM, Manchester, St. John Fisher, Western New England. Some are pending accreditation and those types of things, but we've got 7 online schools now, or we will have 7 online schools. And so that's kind of one thing that some students want to do, although the tuition there isn't different and sometimes more expensive than going to school in person. It is one way that maybe you could kind of keep part of your full-time job, especially if it's distance or something like that. And you could go to pharmacy school and kind of pay as you go. I know a couple of students that have done that. Overall, I think 16% of students graduate with absolutely no debt from pharmacy school. The rest average around $180,000, something like that. So you can kind of compare yourself to that. The other question I guess I could answer while I'm kind of going on this topic is, when does it make sense to wait to go to pharmacy school? So if you got an acceptance from a pharmacy school that costs X number of dollars, at what point does it make sense to go to in-state somewhere else? And that answer is $68,000 divided by 4 years. So let me kind of explain that a little bit, because that's maybe something that most people don't think about. So if you're, the big thing with pharmacy school is, well, I want to get right into pharmacy school so I can go out and make, $100,000 or whatever money that people are making. And if you make $100,000, you actually take home 68. So if you waited a year and you can save more than $68,000 by going in-state somewhere instead of out-of-state, then it makes sense if that number is 17,000. So let's say, for example, that you were going to go to a school that was $250,000, but by going to a different state and you can pay $150,000, $100,000 less. That $100,000 over the 4 years is greater than the $68,000, so it makes sense for you to actually go to that other school, wait the year. The amount of money you would have made in your first year as a student is actually less, and that doesn't even count what money you make in that year where you're able to work full time, not go to school, not have classes getting in the way of you making money. So the number is actually probably quite a bit smaller than that. One of the things I don't think a lot of people think about is the in-state or the out-of-state schools that are still cheaper than the private ones. So depending on how much you're paying, but I remember Florida has an in-state tuition around $24,000, but its out-of-state is only $36,000, and $36,000 is not a ton more, or it's right around where a lot of the privates are. And I got to tell you, I went to Gainesville for 2 years. It is an awfully nice place to go to school. So if you're looking at a school that is anywhere in that $36,000, $40,000 range, and it doesn't seem like a really nice place to be, I might consider Florida because it's just amazing. And then when you talk about who sends more students to residencies than any other college, there are only 2 schools in the hundreds. UCSF sent 131, and Florida sent 101 last year. And I'm not sure about that UCSF number. I feel like that was where the 4-year and the 3-year program kind of met. I feel like their class sizes are going to be much smaller from here on out. So I think Florida will be sending more students to residency than any other college in the country. However, that doesn't mean their match rate is absolutely, it's actually right around the average, right around 68, 69%, which is pretty good for so many people. And if you talk about all the people that wanted to get a residency in the first place, it's about a little over half, about 55% do get something. So, I think that if you're a pre-pharmacy student who's starting to listen to this, like, what's this residency thing all about? What should I be doing? There are a lot of options that can really lower your costs to go, but there's really not much of a good reason to pay anything more than $36,000 for pharmacy school right now, because if one of the schools that is in absolutely the nicest location, one of the most beautiful campuses in the country, it's in Florida, and is doing that, unless you have family or something that's keeping you where you need to be, or a job, something like that, going to Gainesville for 4 years is probably one of the nicest things you could do. And then when you talk about APPEs, you could do those out of state. So you're really only talking about 3 years. So I don't know why I'm talking up Florida so much. They would have turned me down when I went to pharmacy school, because back then they didn't take out-of-state students at all. And although I went to the University of Florida, I went as an out-of-state student, so I would not have been considered. But anyway, I just there's no reason that people should be paying or owe $180,000 after school. And it's really hurting us as a profession, because we're talking about $2.268 billion in student loans that our students are paying each year. And we're trying to pay those back. And I think that's kind of a tragedy when you have plenty of spaces at the best schools that are charging less tuition. Very little reason that I can think of to not just get those tuitions down by just not going to the expensive schools. Like, why are you paying so much? And I'm going to guess that it's because it's nearby, or they accepted you and you didn't apply anywhere else, and those types of things. All right, well, let me get off my you should do things for free instead of pay for them soapbox. If you need to talk to me, TonyThePharmacist@gmail.com. I'll probably kind of slow down here in February and then kind of come back strong in March. Take a little bit of a break, focus on my classes, family, and all that. But I do wish you guys the best as you're kind of going through this very tough time. And I'll always answer an email. I'll always help you out if you need it. I'm even help somebody with their application just now. Some of them have very late applications or late deadlines because of the fewer applications that were coming in this year. But again, TonyThePharmacist at gmail.com and then residency.teachable.com.